Welcome back. Usually Memorial Day weekend features a full slate of baseball games, the NBA and NHL playoffs, and a lot more, but not this year. However, all the major leagues, they're all working on plans to try and get back to business. Now, MLB, they like to start their season in July, but there are an incredible amount of moving parts and challenges, including COVID testing, salary structure, cooperation with host cities, and much, much more. NBA, they're expected to release a plan next week with its eyes on also trying to restart the season in July. NHL, they're mulling over a plan to just head right to the playoffs with the top 24 teams taking the ice. But all of the pro leagues are facing similar issues involving player safety and whether or not to have fans and, of course, money. I want to bring in our guest, New York Times sports reporter Victor Mather. Victor, you had a really interesting piece a few days ago where you said that this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to sports. Everything from cultural, political, and the rest will actually weigh into this. And then I think you have the added elements of, the economics of sports and different leagues, what the players are going to be willing to either sacrifice and the fears of how that will play into long-term labor negotiations where this won't be, a concession today that'll kind of turn into a permanent one in the next labor agreement. I know we're on uncharted territory, but I know you look globally. Do you have a sense what the Big Four, at least in the U.S., what it might look like sooner than later for baseball, football, basketball, hockey?
Well, I don't think anyone actually knows the answer to that question, but because it depends so much on what happens with the virus. But ultimately, what the leagues, I think, are going to be trying to do is get the season started as soon as they can, almost certainly to do it without any fans in attendance, and possibly to do it in a limited number of locations so that there isn't a lot of flying around from city to city. You may say to yourself, well, that's not bad. Basketball, 5 players on each team, but you're going to need well over 100 people to run a basketball game. You're going to need, besides the players, you're going to need the coaches, you're going to need support staff and trainers and camera people and security guards. It's a pretty significant operation even without fans.
I'll use baseball as just one example, and I thought it was interesting, Victor, that you had a pitcher, Blake Snell on Tampa Bay Devil Rays. He said, it's not worth it. This risk reward, it's not personally for me worth it. And he got some support from some of the players. I also saw a former player, Tom Glavine, to say that if the players don't come back because of the major haircut that they're going to take here in terms of what were guaranteed salaries that they won't get necessarily going back, it'll be the players that are blamed. What about the dynamics that are going into the decisions from the owners with how much they're losing at the gate in terms of revenue, and from the players from how much they're going to have to give up, but also the fear of backlash from, action-starved fans who want to see anything? I mean, for crying out loud, they're watching Korean baseball right now. Walk through the dynamic of player and owner and the calculations each are doing in real time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation. I'm old enough to remember the big baseball strike of 1981, and even though you could look at the economics of both sides, people pretty much blamed the players. Maybe fans are more sophisticated today, but the players often take the brunt of the blame for this kind of thing. And it's not just the financial considerations, although those are significant and money is behind everything. It's also health considerations. Players may be concerned about tackling a player who might have COVID. And do they get to come back to their families? Are they going to bring something back to them? Are they going to be sequestered from their families? How is that going to work? I think perhaps we haven't paid enough attention to possible concerns players will have when this actually does start getting started up again.
Victor, I remembered really what shut down pro sports. A Utah Jazz player all of a sudden got it, and then all of a sudden they realized his teammate had it as well. And the friction apparently within the locker room over that. There will be an inevitability, regardless of sport, where there's going to be positive tests. What kind of an appetite do you think, and I know they're trying to get ahead of this, but when that happens, what are they going to do? Are they going to all of a sudden quarantine the entire team? Are they going to say, okay, well, the impacted player will just basically shut him or her down for 2 weeks, but the rest of you go on? Do they not travel in the meantime? How do they navigate for the inevitability that they will be positive? And I'm even making the leap here, Victor, that they're willing to press forward when that happens to a teammate. How do the logistics work?
Yeah, well, looking at some of the European leagues that are starting up again, they're definitely getting positive tests. Even if they test 700, 800 players in the league and they only get 5 or 6 positive tests, which a few leagues have been having, that's still 5 or 6 positive tests. That's not zero. And I think my guess is that they will quarantine individuals and not just say, hey, your whole team is out, because then you've got problems. If you might well have a league with 3 teams that have 2 players each test positive, you can't really pull 3 teams out of a competition. So my guess is they will quarantine individual players, but that's another thing that they're working on hard. And I don't think even the leagues themselves know the answer to that question right now.
It is amazing, though. I don't know how, but my son's got me watching Bundesliga soccer here, and I'm actually starting to know some of the names, so things are getting dangerous right now. But my gosh, the starving, as we saw that with The Last Dance, that 10-part series, there is such an appetite here, even by marginal fans, Victor, not guys like you and I, that they're desperate for something. I just wonder how much they're going to be able to reconcile how odd it is without fans there and not being able to participate in person. It totally does change the dynamic.
Well, hearing from some European players who the Germans who last week were playing, and some Korean baseball players and so on, as you mentioned, they almost all have a negative reaction to it. And sometimes it's extremely negative. Some of the players have said things like, it doesn't feel like sports. It feels terrible. I hate it. One guy said, it feels like I'm dancing with my sister. The life is sucked out of it. And I think some people even watching on TV feel that. You're used to hearing a big crowd noise, and the celebrations are more muted. And even if we get the NBA, the Major League Baseball, the NFL, even if they all come back, great, we're back in business, it's going to be lacking something. You're absolutely right, without the fans in attendance.
It is surreal, and literally, I think, as much as so many other chapters in this country, it's figuring it out as it goes along here. And I think as everybody, they're planning now, but if the fall and winter brings a second spike, as every epidemiologist that I speak to says you should count on, what do they do then? How do they shut down all over again and then try and start up again? And then you take amateur athletes in college, and oh my God, there's so many moving parts to this. But Victor, I really appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Richard, thanks so much for inviting me.
Up next, sports are shut down, and so are movie theaters, with few exceptions. But you can still catch new films, and some blockbusters are in the pipeline waiting to get released. After the break, we'll discuss the business of the movie business and whether or not it could change forever in the wake of COVID.